All right, good deal. Can you guys, can you hear me okay on the Zoom at least?
Sit up front, further up front.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, good. And Ken, are you all ready to go if I get this?
Yeah, we're ready, Brian.
All right, good deal. All right, well, thank you, everybody, and apologies for the technical difficulties. We're just getting things set up here. We will be recording this session, so in case you miss anything or can't hear anything, we are going to put this online right after the meetings or tomorrow, so you'll be able to take a look and listen. But first of all, I want to welcome you all. I'm Brian Bedoli. I'm the Executive Director for the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency. We're really excited for all that you could join us, talk today about a plan we've been working on for the past year in the South Norwalk community. We'll talk a little bit about the study area specifically, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the intent of why we're here and kind of what we're hoping to achieve today with your participation. So as I mentioned, we've been working over the past year to kind of take a look at the South Norwalk community, really in response to feedback we've received for a good amount of time. In terms of concerns that have been developing around development in and around the South Norwalk train station, various ideas that have been brought to our attention from members of the community in terms of how to best manage growth and how to best deal with some of the things that are affecting the overall quality of life in the neighborhood. And I think that's going to be one of the themes that we're going to talk about a lot today, and we have been talking about with our consulting team. Is what is going on in the South Norwalk community from a community perspective, from a technical perspective, and we want to just basically have a conversation with you all today about some things that you may be thinking, present you some information that we've developed over the past year, and get your feedback, get your thoughts about what data we're going to be presenting, what some of the challenges we've identified are. We want to hear if those are the challenges you're experiencing, or if there's other things that we should be considering. So this is really the start of the community dialogue around this plan. And we wanted to have this conversation before we started even, starting to develop certain policies that could obviously impact people living in and around the area. So we're joined today by our team at VHB. They'll introduce themselves in a bit, talk about the group of experts that we've pulled together to address a lot of these challenges that we've all been, sort of discussing at various levels and various resolutions for the past, good long while as we've been doing development throughout South Norwalk. So I won't, speak too much right now. I want to really get into the program. There's going to be a lot of information presented to you. And really what we want to do is use that as the baseline for a conversation around, where we're going with this all and next steps. So I will give it over to Ken Schwartz. And Ken, I don't know if you want to introduce any members of your team first, or I'll kick it over to you. And I don't know if it's just me, but I'm not hearing Ken at all on the Zoom.
I'm not either.
Can you hear me now, Brian?
No, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay. So my name's Ken Schwartz, and I'm a partner at VHB. We're the firm that's been leading the effort to working on the community plan. Joining me is Michael Goldenberg, project manager, and Jennifer Nelson, who's a planner working with the team. On the call, we have Nicole Bennett, who is our equity strategist and has been advising us on equitable development. She does this work throughout the country. And also joining us is from ESI is Stephen Matson, who has been looking at the real estate and economic component of the plan. And then on the left, you see the folks from the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency, Brian, Carly, Katie, who's here with us, Mark Dillon, and Jonathan Hopkins, all of whom are on the call as well. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time just sort of going over. On the right here, you see the study area. This is the focus of the plan is around a primary study area, which is basically the core is along Martin Luther King Boulevard, Lexington Avenue, and South Main Street. And you can see that identified in the blue. The dark blue is the primary study area. You'll see up in the upper corner up here is the South Norwalk train station. And then just to the north of the South Norwalk train station is an area that's been undergoing some significant redevelopment. But the focus of our study area is in the neighborhood to the south of the train station. And as you can see on the left side are a series of goals and objectives that have been guiding our work over the last 9 months. They include things like addressing concerns about disinvestment, displacement, and gentrification. This was something that was brought to our attention right at the beginning of the project. And we have spent the last 9 months really digging into the data and understanding issues around disinvestment, displacement, and gentrification. We want to look at contributors to social vulnerability, and you'll hear some of the work that we've been doing in that area. Developing strategies to improve the quality of life, focusing on economic, aesthetic, social, and environmental impacts of displacement and development, and to engage as many stakeholders. That's why we really want to hear from you in terms of just building upon the richness and the history of the neighborhood and the diversity and the cultural richness within the neighborhood. So the focus of today is to share with you a lot of the existing conditions, the data that we've been assembling around land use, around open space, real estate, things around internet access, public health, transportation. So we're going to be sharing a lot of data with you, but we're going to run through it rather quickly. But then at the end, we really want to hear from you in terms of, were there any surprises in the information that we shared? Was there anything that was missing in the information that we shared? And what are the priorities that you want to make sure we address as part of this plan? Because you all live in this neighborhood. You experience it day in and day out. You know better than we do what the issues are. We have been digging in on the data and have assembled some really good data that can kind of reinforce some of the things, but we really want to hear from you in terms of the day-to-day impacts, the things that you feel really need to be addressed to address these goals and objectives that you see on the left. So it's about a 15-minute presentation. There'll be a number of us presenting. We go to the next slide. So I'm going to now turn it over to Nicole Bennett, who is our equity strategist, who has been a really great addition to our team in terms of looking at best practices for equitable development in other communities throughout the United States that are addressing some of the same things that South Norwalk is addressing. Nicole?
Thank you, Ken. Good evening, everyone. Excuse me. I am going to start with a really good definition of what equitable development is that we found from the Government Alliance on Race Equity. And you can see here sort of the key elements of equitable development, what we hope to accomplish through equitable development. You can read this definition, but essentially what we want to ensure is that any development that occurs benefits all sectors of the community, and that no one sector is being disproportionately burdened by any impacts of the development. In addition, we want to make sure if there have been negative impacts on certain groups in the community from other developments, we try to address that through future development, and certainly to make sure that we aren't causing any additional harm. So the bottom line is we just want to make sure that everybody benefits from the development. Next slide. So what we did was we took a look across the country at what some other communities have done when they are, doing transit-oriented development, or lots of development pressures are coming into communities to ensure that everyone is benefiting and no particular groups are being overly impacted. We looked at some national policy guidelines from sort of research and some of the like planning organizations, just to get an idea of what that policy guidance is. Then we looked at specific case studies across the country to see what types of plans, like the one we're developing here, communities have done and how successfully they were at addressing issues like gentrification and displacement. And we put together some best practices, some key themes of what those communities were doing. And so you can see here on this slide, I'll just run through a few of them kind of quickly. Zoning reform is probably one of the most popular things we hear about now. And that's just where we take a look at our land use policies and what we're allowing to be built where, and how we might revise that to ensure that we are encouraging a diversity of housing types, a diversity of land uses, to ensure that we're encouraging affordable housing. We're trying to reduce parking costs or transportation costs. That's through our zoning reforms, and we typically see that in our comprehensive plans. Integrating equity into everything we do, that's essentially what this project is all about. And all of the themes that we saw, all of the plans that we looked at, had a foundation or a pillar of equity. So that's really driving everything that we're doing. Lots of focus on local economic development and trying to help neighborhood-based businesses thrive and not be displaced from the development that is coming. And in addition to preserving the ones that are there, encouraging new businesses. So there's that connection to the community and building economic prosperity for the people who are already living there. And then community engagement is foundational to any type of planning, but specifically when you're trying to make sure you're being equitable and inclusive across all groups, there is a very intentional effort to make sure that we're not just, as Ken was saying, we're not just gathering data and then developing a plan based on that data, but that we're talking to you, we're hearing from you, and that we actually co-create the plan together. So it's something that you can be proud of, something you feel like it has your fingerprints on it. And then the final thing that we've seen is a lot of use of data, which we're using here, but to inform what we do. So there's a nice combination of qualitative data, which is the type of information you'll hear here, or quantitative data, but then qualitative data from what we hear from you, from what we see when we're out walking around the neighborhood, so that we can measure our success. So we see places like Tucson, which has a tool that they use to help them identify communities where gentrification and displacement might be happening already, or communities that might be prime for that to happen, communities where it may have already happened, so that you can target your policies to address those communities and try to stabilize them. If it's a community where gentrification and displacement haven't occurred yet, but one that might be vulnerable to it, then you can develop specific policies so that when development comes, you're helping people who are there be able to afford to stay there. There's a big emphasis in all the plans I looked at on trying to minimize displacement. And I think I've covered everything else. We just want to make sure that we are developing policies tailored to your communities. And the national landscape that we looked at helps inform that, but it certainly will not, we won't propose any policy that isn't customized for your community and your specific issues and your priorities. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Ken. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we go to the next slide, and then we'll okay, so we're going to now share with you our key findings from the analysis that we've done on those topics that you see on the right side of the slide. Just in terms of how we arrived at this information, it was based upon field observations. We spend a considerable amount of time out in the neighborhood, driving around, taking photographs, walking the streets, and experiencing the community, both from the car as well as, from walking around. We read through prior plans and reports. We collected a whole bunch of data from the city of Norwalk, US Census, real estate data. As Nicole mentioned, there were a series of guidance documents that we looked at. We looked at best practices, and then we spoke to a lot of people in the community. And that's what we want to do again with you tonight, is to hear from you. So a lot of that information led to the key findings. So the first one that we're going to run through, Jenny Nelson's going to lead us through the land use and open space findings of the existing condition.
Can I come over there? Or,
Yeah.
I don't know what's like that.
I think he'll
Yeah,
hear.
for the audio.
Oh, right.
Can everyone online hybrid hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Perfect. So we did a bit of assessment of land use and open space in South Norwalk. So we found that 74% of land uses are residential, 9% are commercial, 5% are industrial, and approximately 9% are vacant. The primary open space is Springwood Park, San Vincenzo Park, and Ryan Park, the latter of which just received a big facelift in the past 5 years or so. So there's a lot of new amenities in that area. There's some land that is changing use cases. We know that Meadow Gardens is being redeveloped, and South Norwalk Elementary is another big project that's going on in South Norwalk right now. Within the study area, the city of Norwalk owns approximately 60 acres that's split across 18 properties. And most of those are already well used, with things like the fire station, some housing authority properties, and Ryan Park. When we were looking at some redevelopment opportunities, the city helped us, and stakeholders helped us identify 16 properties that were identified as potentially suited for better uses than they are right now. So that means that right now they're kind of underutilized or they're vacant. And I also looked at the South Norwalk Station area study. A lot of residents from this area participated in that study, and desired land uses that were, that people were polled for included placemaking, which is like small places where people can gather. So that's like plazas or little parks. Improved walking facilities, and then also economic development in the form of housing, small scale neighborhood retail, and offices. And so our final takeaways are that land uses are not as well connected as they could be. Industrial parcels create kind of a visual barrier and a definitive line with where people can go and where residents are not really allowed. And there's some gaps there. And there's also a lack of programmed open space distributed throughout the site. Yeah. So then we also assessed the environment and climate. These are things that are outside of the city of Norwalk's control. However, what is in our control is how we adapt to and mitigate the effects of things like climate change and environmental shifts, and even, your regular snowstorms and rainstorms. So the key findings were, I'm going to start with the maps on the top, the flooding and storm surge. So the eastern streets here, especially Washington Street, Water Street, Meadow Street, and MLK Drive, are susceptible to flooding and storm surge. And then the bottom two maps show the connection between tree cover and heat. So we looked at some tree coverage maps, and there's a clear boundary of where the trees are in the green and where there are fewer trees, which is like the whiter map color. And it's like a direct correlation with where there's extreme heat. So the takeaways from these map analysis are that the lack of tree cover creates risks for people during extreme heat events. So this includes things like heat stress or heart attack or asthma, respiratory issues. Flooding poses risks to people and infrastructure. So every time roads flood, there are economic losses and there's time and money associated with making those repairs. And then we also found that there's redevelopment challenges associated with brownfield properties, which are typically underutilized and may have some contamination associated with them. So how can we kind of revitalize those, change those to make them better suited for residents here? Now I'm going to hand it off to our consultant ESI or Stephen from ESI to go over real estate.
Thanks, Jenny. Again, my name's Steve Mattson. I'm an associate director with eConsult Solutions. We've been working with the VHB team to really understand the South Norwalk neighborhood and really understand the real estate dynamics that have been affecting affordability within the area. So you can't really tell this story, I'm sure, as many are well aware, without telling the story over time and taking a look longitudinally at the study area. So what we did first was try to understand the population and understand any kind of changing dynamics there. And what we found over a 10-year look at the available census data was that in terms of race and ethnicity, income, and housing tenure, so like whether you're a renter or owner, a lot of those things haven't changed within the area. So race and ethnicity has not generally changed. It's one of the most diverse neighborhoods within South Norwalk. Generally, incomes are lower relative to the rest of Norwalk, and it's largely a renter population primarily. If you look at the visuals over to the right-hand side, you'll see that the area rent growth has been on a percentage basis much higher relative to the rental growth compared to Norwalk, and then compared to CPI rent, which compares the growth of rent across the country. Just to kind of tell that story with a little more data behind it, if you look at the population within the South Norwalk area, over that 10-year period that we looked at, we saw a growth generally of approximately 100 people and about a growth in terms of housing units within the study area of about 30 units. Generally, that kind of growth would show that more housing units were generally needed. If you look at the supply of housing, it hasn't generally changed all that much, even though the relative population growth remained on net somewhat small. That said, it's still the supply of housing units really didn't grow to meet the full amount of need of population growth within the area. All that said, the combinations described there is that demand for housing remains very high. The supply of housing remains fairly low, and the rising cost that is associated with the limited supply of housing, and most importantly, the limited supply of affordable housing, has made supply pressures and housing cost pressures more difficult for those living in the South Norwalk area. This obviously too is a story not just told on the rental side, but on the ownership side as well. The price growth in terms of the median sale within Norwalk has generally been much higher than relative to the relative growth of CPI shelter, which again tracks that growth of the cost of a home over the period of time. So if you look at it from 2015 to 2023, nearly a 20% difference in that growth in the area in Norwalk proper versus the rest of the country. So a very high high housing cost area, which has implications certainly for the rest of the South Norwalk neighborhood, and from our perspective is something that the community certainly is seeking to address. To kind of toss it to the next slide, I think we're passing it back to you, Jenny.
Yep.
Thank you.
And John Curran online. Thank you, Steve. John Curran online has his hand up, but we're just gonna keep moving through the presentation. But if you have questions, we're happy to answer after the presentation. So next we're moving to digital equity. So this term has kind of been thrown around a lot nationally and regionally. What does this really mean? We're talking about access to high-speed internet, access to digital devices like laptops, smartphones, computers, tablets, and access to digital skills training. So you need all three to kind of be able to effectively use your device. So here in Norwalk and South Norwalk specifically, we found that nearly every broadband serviceable location, which is basically your houses, your businesses, any building, any structure that should receive Wi-Fi, pretty much everyone has it. However, there's a discrepancy between those who have the ability to access Wi-Fi and those who can actually afford to use it. So 15% of residents do not have an internet subscription in South Norwalk. Consequently, 18% of households only have a smartphone and no other kind of device. This is probably because they're relying on that cellular data instead, and they don't have access to that Wi-Fi. But again, this is data that's coming from the census and coming from multiple different places. But what's really important is to hear from the community to kind of verify, like, this is what's actually happening on the ground floor. And here on the right is a map of covered populations. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, has highlighted populations that are vulnerable to these digital inequities, such as not having the appropriate devices or digital skills training or internet. And as you can see in our study area, the South Norwalk census tract is the deepest red, meaning that there's more population groups that fall within those covered populations, like older adults, like people with disabilities, people of low income households. South Norwalk is specifically vulnerable to those things. So the takeaways include digital inequity can translate into greater social inequity. Obviously, since the COVID-19 pandemic, we realized that we need internet for basically everything, including online banking or accessing classes and education, or communicating with family, working. You need it for everything. So, and another takeaway is that trainings must be accessible and offered in multiple languages. Moving to the next is community health and safety. So this is a study that we did of data from the CDC. So it's the CDC Places Map, which analyzes 6 kind of key health indicators, which include high blood pressure, asthma, heart disease, diabetes, cholesterol, and obesity. This map found that there's overall a lower life expectancy of 77 years in South Norwalk compared to the city of Norwalk, which is lower than this city of Newark in the state of Connecticut. The top 2 differences here is that South Norwalk is particularly susceptible, or has a greater population with diabetes and with obesity. And this is not only connected to exercise and physical fitness and transportation and mobility, and it's also greatly related to the healthy food sources that may or may not be within your area. We also found that South Norwalk is a low income and low access food area, which is informally kind of called the food desert, which means that there's a lot of kind of smaller places where you can get food, but there's not kind of grocery stores where you can get the appropriate foods and vegetables to put on your table, compared to some other neighborhoods. So the takeaways, again, higher risk for obesity and diabetes in surrounding census tracts, and there needs to be a greater focus on getting access to healthy food into South Norwalk.
In terms of transportation, we looked at a few different types of elements. We looked at existing sidewalk conditions and sidewalk gaps that would create connectivity issues with pedestrians or bikers having access to public parks or schools or other venues. And we found specifically near several parks and the proposed school that's being constructed is there are some gaps, some missing or disconnected sidewalks that, if those were in place, would kind of create a continuous pathway for pedestrians, which we heard and it was very important. Truck traffic, we heard that this is a major issue in the study area, especially the mixing with residential traffic. And we looked into this a bit, and the map, you can see the yellow parcels are mostly industrial parcels within the study area, and those are significant generators of truck traffic. And, you know, we're talking about the UPS distribution facility and some of the contractor yards. And this is a major issue. So again, some of our takeaways, there seems to be a lack of safe, active transportation options, like for biking or walking and so forth. And then we do think there are opportunities for mobility hubs, greater integration between like bus and rail modes, especially around Sono Station. And this is the city is investing heavily in the area around the train station, especially with the infrastructure enhancements that are currently being designed.
So what we want to do now is go to the next slide. Just open it up to general reactions. Were there any surprises, things that you heard that you were surprised by, things that were missing that we need to address or think about? What are the most important challenges that need to be addressed as part of the plan? And what, if you were to pick like the top 3 priorities that you think this plan needs to address head on, what would they be? And we have index cards, postcards here. If folks don't feel comfortable talking, they can write it down on the index card, but we got such a small group of people here, so we're hoping that we hear from each and every one of you multiple times. So why don't we start in the room, and then are there a number of people online as well?
16.
Okay, well, let's start in the room and then we can alternate back and forth. So who wants to go first?
I think what the area needs again is to have home ownership in order for us to move forward. Because when I first moved here 55 years ago, it was primarily home owners that lived in the area, and they took pride in it. And now, because we have mostly renters, we have a lot of issues with cars, and some streets are impassable sometimes. Sometimes we can't even get out of our own street. It's so bad. On the weekends, they park on both sides. Where parking was never allowed, it's now being allowed. And there's more cars, obviously, with more people that are renters. So some of these homes are rented out to more than what's required of that particular home. So there's like maybe 5 to 6 cars to a household when there's less than that.
Okay.
So I think that's one big issue.
Can folks on Stephen and Nicole, did you hear what was said?
I heard.
Near the end, I
Yeah,
did.
I was gonna say, I heard most of it.
Okay, good. I want to make sure that you heard that. Next, who else?
I was surprised that, well, not really surprised that back, I think it was number 3 or 4, they were talking about housing affordability. You know, when I've been in several meetings when they built new water back there, and I've been in several meetings, and it was told to us that the housing would, the people that were there would come first, would be, you know, had some affordable housing afforded. And once it was built, I don't see that many people that can afford to stay. You know, when they're sitting around, even to my church, they sit around the price of the bedrooms and all of this. and the average person can't afford to live.
Mhm.
So when the people there were people that lived in that project over 20, 30 years, and they were removed from the place, and you put in they put in all the new apartments, and raised the rent so high that people that they say that could move back, they can't afford to move back.
Mhm.
I go down to the train station every day, and I see people that live here coming in on the train because they were forced out to stay somewhere. They come in on the train to work here. So you have the people from other cities that are living here, then they go out to New York and different places. But the people that were here, that work here, can't afford to stay.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was my concern, that because we were told in a meeting with the mayor and all of this, when it was being built, that we're not regentrifying the place or anything, but to me, it happened.
Mhm.
Because the people that live there, they can't afford the prices that they're charging for to live in those places. And, you know, I mean, to me, it's a shame that they're living in a city, they're working in a city and can't afford to stay.
Mhm. Stephen, did you hear that?
Yeah, if I can just kind of, it's to me, I guess, a workforce housing issue, or the lack of availability of workforce housing.
I think it goes beyond workforce housing, because when you say workforce housing, we usually think of people who make enough money, or teachers and firefighters, police officers who have that ability to make a pretty decent
Mhm.
salary. When you talk about low income, let's talk about low income, somebody making $20-$25 an hour, bringing home, that kind of money, and that's what they do full time. But I think what's also happening is we have a lot of absentee landlords, and now that everything has improved in the area, we don't have rent control. So someone who was paying $300 a month is now asked to tack on $100, $500. And this has been real. We've had people come into our fair rent office with those issues. Landlords not going up reasonably. Nobody's income goes up that high. Nobody's rates goes up exponentially.
Mhm.
So how can you go from 200 to asking for 5? I mean, that's where we are. So we don't have any type of rent control or anything that we can say in the city that you can't do it. It's your property. That's how government works. That's how things work. If you can't pay, you can go because we can get someone else.
Mhm.
Right? And what this young lady was speaking on, I think, we all know what overcrowding looks like. We all know when an absentee landlord lets too many people live in a house, and we already know what the structure of South Norwalk looks like. It's very difficult to get down those narrow streets. It's one of the oldest parts of the city. And so when we don't take those things into consideration, these sorts of things sort of happen. We've got sparsed in between properties, all these little junkyards or contracting yards, and there's still a problem. I mean, to me, that speaks to the condition and how the community looks at it. And until we change that, we're always going to.
I live over Hyatt Avenue, and I have people that come over to Hyatt Avenue and park their truck and trailer on Frost Street and leave it there. They leave it there 2 or 3 days, then they come back and they drive away. But in the meantime, I mean, they clutter up the neighborhood because they don't want to pay to park somewhere that the truck can, should be. It shouldn't be in my front door where I go out the door, I gotta look at tractor trailer park every morning and come out. But this is what's happening because they have nowhere to park. I mean, I see people come and park their tractor trailer or park their car, and they get in another car and go away. Come back 3 or 4 days later just to pick up the car. I mean, and then when I get ready to go out the door, I can't get out my driveway someone because some people already, got the street blocked up, trying to start up the cars and this and that. And before, it was a nice neighborhood, but now, I mean, I went out the door the other morning and right across the street, somebody had dumped a whole load of trash, right behind Lowe's, I live behind Lowe's. And they dumped a load of trash and just left. So you got the other people coming in, it's the problem that it's so many cars, right on the corner. It was an elderly person had a house there, and he sold the house. They knocked it down and put up this thing that apartments galore. Now, when I get around, it's gotta be 15 and 20 apartment buildings right on the corner. It's things like that, and it's right up against the neighbor back. He can't walk between the building and his house. If they were to do something to his house, they couldn't, because it's that close. But it's things like that. I mean, they don't look out for it. They trap. Traffic is the problem.
So help us think through, how do we address these things? Like what are the, like around things like trucks that are parked in your neighbor? Is that an enforcement thing? Is that something that? Yep. So that's an enforcement. I mean, in terms of coming out of this plan, the kinds of recommendations and policies so an enforcement of parking enforcement, sort of revisiting that and looking at what should be done.
I just get traffic. Even cars, there's just so many cars that the street, Lowe's used to be a two-way street. They built Lowe's and they took 6 feet of the sidewalk and moved it and made the road smaller. Now they had signs that no parking. But when they built Lowe's, they took the no parking sign, but now I squeeze through. To get home tonight, I gotta squeeze through. People got to mirror it all in. Or you go through, you tear them off. You can't track, even when it snows, the plow can't come. So it's a problem with the plow.
We should give people online.
Yeah, okay, let's, we have some. Sure.
Real quick, Ken, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Quite a bit.
Oh, we have somebody talking in here,
Yeah,
Brian.
people-
We'll call you up after.
Employers who allow their employees to take their trucks home, their work trucks home for transportation, right back and forth. So then you end up with trucks in your area because this is the transportation. But an employer thinks they're helping, but that's a burden on us as the residents, that every day that we've got these different sized trucks in our neighborhood. I mean, I think it was a FedEx truck that was parked by San Vincenzo Park for 2 days. A FedEx truck? I had to call FedEx to get that moved. And so and because it happens, people just find ways to do that, and find little hiding spaces and rooms to do that. We don't enforce that.
Brian, did you have something you were gonna say?
Yeah, just to, I think it was Darlene's point, I think the gentleman as well, is just in terms of the housing affordability question, I want to make sure we don't lose that point. But I think one thing, and I don't know if Stephen has done it with ESI, to take a look at the income banding in the area, to basically look at the real picture of what people are making and what their affordability is relative to the market. And then basically figuring out how much supply of each housing stock is there, and so we could identify what gap we're actually dealing with. I think it's something we want to take a little deeper dive into if we haven't already, just to flag that, because I think it's a very important point.
Yeah, we've started diving into that. I think the longer report will have that kind of income banding analysis, Brian.
Okay, yeah, because I think Darlene's point, yeah, just reiterating, is well served in terms of, what actual affordability is relative to, people living there. I think it's an important thing we should really dive into as part of this plan.
Others on the line any questions, thoughts?
Mary Mann, I see you have your hand up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Hi. Just a couple of things. Traffic control. I live on Lexington Avenue. We've got a corner with some stores. Nobody enforces traffic. It is so difficult getting in and out of the street. Deliveries, they have these great big trucks out there, delivering to this little store. Our street has become a speedway, as well as, for whatever reason, access for these larger trucks, which literally shakes the whole street. I really hope that you look at some traffic control issues within our area. I want to address affordability. I really think that we need to consider rent control, as was mentioned by someone earlier. There are a number of houses on Lexington Avenue and some of the other areas. You take a two-family house that has about 20 people that lives in it. It's been converted to a rooming house. You don't know who's who. There's cars all over the place. I don't know how we're going to deal with some of these issues, but I think they really need to be dealt with. Blight conditions, right now in front of my house, they think it's just fine to put furniture and stuff on the street and leave it there for weeks. So I think I would appreciate it if the city would take a little more time and a little more effort in looking at some of the negative conditions that happens in South Norwalk, and maybe try to address them. I have called and got regarding blight. I have called, nobody ever does anything. Nothing ever happens. We've got some serious problems down here.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else online?
John Curran, I know you had your hand up for a while during our presentation. Did you have any feedback for us? Any ideas?
If not, anyone else back in? Yes.
A lot of these topics have been ongoing for decades. There, again, someone as they brought up lack of enforcement. We have a department in the city of Norwalk that's designated blight. I've called, nothing. Had an issue with the neighbor who recently bought a house 2 years ago. I guess there was some sort of a program to buy a home in this area and live in it for a year. You must get some sort of fixed rate on your interest. Nice individual, 3 kids and wife. A year to the month, they then moved out. Next thing I know, it's 6 new occupants in the home, and they're living from the attic to the basement, and it's been reported. Nothing was done. They were taking over the road with their cars. The occupants in this home, some of them don't even speak English. So I took matters in my own hands, straightened out the landlord for a bit, cleaned it up. What I was surprised in your showing of the area was with air quality. We can eliminate a lot of these contractors. There's a church lot that's leasing, and the trucks come up and down the roads twice a day, obviously, because they're moving their equipment and people in and out of the area to go to work. It's causing a lot of dust from the roads that causes health issues, asthma, and quality of life. The other thing was having okay, I know it is what it is as far as cost of living in Connecticut in the Northeast, and this issue is all over, up and down the coast. You're having people that want to move into an area like this, like South Norwalk, they want to make it a good residential and maybe take care of these homes, give people incentives. Like South Norwalk Electric just went up 10% on their electricity. We have the other utility company, EverSource. I hear through the news media, they wanna go up another 30% or 40%. Water has gone up, taxes have gone up, home insurance has gone up. I mean, my insurance almost doubled in the last 2 years, from $1,000 to $1,700. So, of course, if you're a homeowner and if you're renting to people, you have to raise your costs, you know, your price on the rent to cover your bases, especially with the taxes. I mean, I've lived in Norwalk my entire life. I remember the state would come along once every 10 years to reassess the property. Now they're coming every 5 years to reassess the property. And it's being done by a company that's out in California. I talked to the gentleman, where are you from? Oh, we're hired by the city of Norwalk. We do the assessment in California. What? I mean, it's ridiculous. I find a lot of the things that are happening here is totally ridiculous. I understand your concept. It's a great idea. It'd be beautiful to revitalize the South Norwalk area, but the city really has to do its part. Reinforcement, one. And enforcing the parking laws, the zoning laws. And we have departments in the city of Norwalk that are supposed to oversee blight and everything else that you see, open drinking. You shut down a liquor store, but the people are still out there. They get so drunk during the day, they pass out. They pass out on the sidewalk. So isn't that a lovely thing? And then you try to bring in people that come in from New York or to work in the area to build this area up. They don't want that. That's been going on for decades. It's nothing new. And we've been fighting against this. And it's, you know.
There's a person at the AT&T building, the Frontier building now. He made that his home right on the sidewalk. He sleeps there. And I'm concerned about the person sleeping. It gets really cold at night, but no one does anything about it. It's been there for weeks, right?
Yeah.
So we have issues like this happening all over Sono.
There was an Amic parting company. We was helping us fight. The community fought that company out, pushed them out. Thank God. They wanted to put 900 down Lexington Avenue, Brown. So now we have a new company down there. It's a little landscaping company. Well, he must have fudged his application, because I've been to City Hall meetings where a small company comes in and they get a permit. The city asks, do you have enough parking for your employees, or for your people that are going to come attend to your business? And of course, oh yeah, we're gonna have 12 parking slots. Well, maybe at that time he did. So he got his permit, he put up a warehouse. All his employees park on Lexington and LeBron. So as we go off to work, this guy's employees park in our spots. Well, again, I take care of my stuff, you know what I mean? It's like, I went to the owner of that business and I gave him my piece of mind. And then I cone off in front of my house. I know I'm not supposed to do that, but you know what? I live here, I pay taxes. And if I have to butt heads with you, I'm going to. And unfortunately, this is where it's come down to, because people don't follow the rules, the laws. They go through the loopholes.
Well, I think part of the reason why they've done is because we say lack of enforcement. And so if you see someone else doing it, or you see all these cars and you take advantage of that and you do it. And I have to say, I know where they live, and they live on a very narrow street where the dump truck had to back out of the street into traffic. So that is how narrow the street is, and it is not conducive to that kind of business and having that sort of thing. And so that is a problem.
My neighbors last weekend, we have a lot of trees from the church property across the street. All the leaves came down. There was a huge pile of leaves on the opposite side of the road. My neighbors got together. We cleaned. we've been cleaning it for years. We take care of ourselves. We have pride in ourselves. Where I don't see other people doing that.
So this slide here starts to address, I mean, we're hearing a lot of what the problems are, which is, we need to hear those and understand them, but then we need to come up with solutions and recommendations, policies that can become the recommendations coming out of this plan that the city and the redevelopment agency can work towards implementing to address these. This slide here starts to, at a very high level, sort of identify what some potential solutions, although, you know, in the transportation one, where, you know, enforcement was something that we heard today that should be added to this list, but maybe spend a little bit of time looking at this and seeing if these are the kinds of things that are, you know, resonate with you, or things that we should consider that aren't on this list. You know, just curious what your reaction to some of these are.
Something? Question here. Well, I live here on Norwalk Redevelopment across the home theater. And I know this project that you're working on many years will mainly affect us across from the development. Right now, it's when I moved from New York, moved here, and I bought that property about 20 years ago. And it's quite different from where we started. It was a quiet neighborhood. It's downtown Norwalk, but it was very quiet. We never used to have trucks that comes by Martin Luther King. That never used to happen. But then after a while, I noticed a shift where all these trucks come by Martin Luther King all day long going this way. I'm not sure what's happening. But do you know that my kids develop after a while? My kids develop asthma afterward. And I know that since it changes between all this traffic, these huge trucks going all day long, we have an end of it. So we're right on the street, right? And they develop these horrible disease, you could say that, right? With that, and they just haven't been the same since all this traffic built up. Now you're coming up with this project. This is going to be this new project. We're adding hundreds of cars. I think it's going to be added in front of where I live. So you can imagine, even now, the next thing, I used to be able to drive out and go to work in the mornings. Now when I pull up, I have to wait there for a while for traffic to just clear so I could get out. It has changed a lot, you know, a big shift. And what this project is going to bring, I know it's going to bring a whole lot more traffic and smog and all that good stuff. So I'm just curious how well that's going to work.
Well, the RAISE grant for MLK will is going to be focused on enhancements to MLK that are not just for the automobile, but with bicycle accommodations, sidewalk accommodations, crosswalks for pedestrians. So I think to a large extent, it's going to be addressing the fact that MLK has become a very auto dominant corridor, and the focus of that grant is to turn it back to give priority to pedestrians and bicyclists and not just the automobile. So that will go a long way to addressing some of the things that you're pointing out.
You know, he's right about the trucks because of Martin Luther King. And you have trucks and they're in both lanes.
Right.
So that you can't even go, you know, you're stuck behind them. And especially the dump trucks and all those, cannot go that fast. You're stuck. And there were a couple of weeks ago, we couldn't even move. I don't even know what was going on because I think they were doing some construction on the highway. And we were stuck, and I sat through, must have been like 5 lights before I could even move forward. It's really gotten much, much worse.
Yeah, so that's why I'm thinking of moving. extremely, I remember when I first, I looked at a lot of places in Connecticut, when I found out Louisville, I fell in love with the place. I love Norwalk. Really, when I say truly love, I fell in love with this place. And it's sad that we were thinking of moving away, right? Just because of the conditions that develop.
Could I ask a question? When is enough? When is enough building? When do we stop forcing so much building in one small space? When is it enough? When is it enough traffic? When is you can only put so much in one place. I don't know, we just been building apartment after apartment. Anywhere you can get one equipment. And when it's enough? I mean, you can only go so much in a small space. And he said, I understand, I bought a house, and like the gentleman said, I take care of my house. And I'm thinking about selling and going south myself. You can't get to the grocery store. You can't get down Connecticut Avenue. They got so much stuff going on down there. And everywhere you see when is it enough? You know what I said. Let's stop and take care of what we got.
Well, I think to a large extent, that's what this plan, and the focus of this plan is really on addressing preservation, affordability, quality of life, health, transportation access, all that, and within the South Norwalk neighborhood. This isn't a plan that's looking at knocking down and redeveloping and building more apartments. It's really one of addressing affordability and neighborhood cohesiveness and so I think that to the city and redevelopment agency's credit, they are addressing this. Many other communities that don't do this, many other cities don't do this. So, and the redevelopment agency is taking this on head on, with a focus on equity. And so, what we want to do is come up with a plan that's got recommendations and policies that the city and redevelopment agency can advance that addresses these problems that you're talking about, truck traffic and access and affordability, things like that. So,
Brian, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, if I could real quick, you guys could hear me okay. So just kind of furthering Ken's point in response to what I've been hearing. I mean, of course, these are all major issues that, we've come across on a number of different planning fronts as we've been working with the community. I think it's important, as Ken mentioned, within the context of these areas, there's a lot that just affects general quality of life in any area. And I think obviously the things that you're talking about today are those exact things. I think what we're really trying to focus on is kind of take a look at the whole picture and figure out, certain things, there's a lot of economic forces that go to play that create some of the housing issues that we're experiencing in Norwalk and the nation for that matter. And so what we want to do today is obviously hear exactly what you were saying. So it's super helpful for all the feedback you've been giving, and then wanting to put that through our consulting team to help us unpack that further so we can all collectively better understand what's going on, and then come back to you all with these policies, as Ken is mentioning, some recommendations, some areas where there's just going to be continuing challenges. I mean, I've always said that, the fact that we are trying to take this head on, I don't claim to have a silver bullet for all these problems. They're very complex challenges. But having this discussion, as I said, is extremely important for us to be able to dive as deep as we can through this plan to identify what can be done and then what we need further community support for. I've heard some things like rent control come up, and we've started that conversation internally to our planning team. Obviously that's something that is not allowed by state law as it currently stands. So there's some external forces that we're going to have to identify and talk about as a group. If that is ultimately something that is interested in being pursued. But I think the key thing is the more we can obtain today and in the diversity of feedback is going to be super helpful, because we're going to take all of this information and put it through, our research team and figure out, what is the most applicable to Norwalk? What are some of the barriers in the way of any of these sort of policies? and what can and ultimately possibly can't be done. So I think just really trying to be honest with you all and then having an open discussion. And even after tonight, like, please keep thinking about this and keep bringing the feedback, because it's really important for us if we are going to be able to tackle this as head on as we hope to. Just adding that, a little different additional background.
Regarding transportation, whenever we go out, we make fun because we see these massive buses that the city has. Some of them are like in tandem buses. They made them bigger. No one's riding them.
Yeah, you can see through the window a silhouette of maybe 3 or 4 people
Sitting in them.
sitting in this huge bus coming down a tight road like
Like
Lexington
Lexington
Avenue
Avenue.
or Ely Avenue, and it's like, why can't they utilize a
Smaller
smaller
buses.
bus? You know, maybe come through a little more frequent, you have a smaller bus, maybe pick up, it'll still achieve its goal
Purpose, yeah.
of transporting people. But it helps with the traffic, having this massive bus coming barreling down the road.
And that's something we can look at the ridership.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if they're gonna cut that, because I
doesn't
think they
make any
did look at
sense.
that. I think
And
the bus company kind of scaled back on.
And the thing is that when I was growing up as a teenager on our street, a lot of these buses, school buses, they minded, they knew what to do. They minded the people if they were gonna cross the road. Now these buses come barreling down Lexington Avenue over to our side. And we have to move over for them. And there's no one in them. Because we see it every day, right, Louis, when we,
That's why all the parked cars get their mirrors knocked off.
yeah,
Because I actually had one early morning when the time had changed. I had a city bus come at me where I slammed on my brake so hard I broke the brake line. The brake pedal went right to the floor, it broke. And I got a number of that bus and I reported it. I don't think anything really happened to him, but he nearly killed me. If I was shaking by the time that had ended, that episode. No, this is a regular city bus.
but it's a daily occurrence.
It's a daily occurrence.
Mulboy Street is the worst because when you come out of the
Train station.
station, if we're going around the bend to the station on Mulboy Street, the buses are flying and they're making wide turns
Onto the right, and
onto our side of the road. To the point where I said, I can't take this anymore. We can't even leave our neighborhood without worrying about what's out there. So we're also thinking about moving because it's no longer what it used to be. Our street was a nice street. Our kids grew up there. They played all together, had like 15 kids hung out together, up the parking lot, the back, the church's big parking lot. Now it's being used for containers, contractor yard, you name it, it's there. I don't even go walking up.
no.
I used to use that church parking lot to go walking for exercise. I don't even do that anymore because I don't know who's in those containers. I don't know who's in those buses. You name it, it's there. So
back to this list of potential solutions. Are there, maybe just go around and just so are there 1, 2, 3 of them that just jump out at you as things that should receive high priority, things that if you were only going to be able to do 3 things to address all of the problems that we've heard today, because there's land use issues, there's environmental issues, there's affordability issues, there's internet access issues, there's health issues, and there are transportation issues. Is there any of those bullets that you see on the right side that really jump out at you or something? Gee, if you can only do one thing, do this. Or are there things that aren't on this list that need to be addressed?
You could go around. If it was just one, well, if we had the three, I would say land use and open space and the real estate and the, community health and safety, but if I only had one, I would say affordability, so that would be real estate.
Okay,
For me, it's land use, real estate, and community health and safety.
Mm.
okay,
I pretty much agree with Lil. But as far as having more trees in the area, that also helps the environment. And I know that for a fact because where I live, I have an abundant amount of trees. They're not mine, they're from the church property. In the summer months, my home is cool. So that helps us quite a bit. And we also have some trees that are in the back, so we're protected. We're even protected against the nor'easters.
and the city has a tree planting program. But there could be recommendations coming out of this in terms of prioritizing the South Norwalk neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I would say, real estate, community health, and safety, and transportation.
Okay,
Cause I tell you, in part, I go to Mount Zion Church, right across from St. Joseph. When every Sunday morning, and I hate to do this, but I have to run people out of our parking lot because they're parking at the other church or whatever. They see a few empty spots on, and I hate to do it because we all go to church. But our insurance don't take care of it, and I have to ask them to move. You know, it's just that bad that I have signed posted. It's just that bad that they come over and park it. Even when, you know, when we're having service, I go out sometimes to 5 cars. I got it. But it's just, I just hate to do it because, but we have to because we have to have parking for our congregation. So it's just bad. I mean, you know.
How about you?
Land use, real estate, and transportation.
So there is a theme here.
Yeah. Pretty much.
How about you? You're second. Okay, well, this is the kind of feedback. Let's go online. See anyone online?
Mary.
Yes. Hi
Hi,
again.
Mary.
Mine would be real estate, and I would like to add in there some way to push home ownership because I think when people own their homes, they're more responsible. Community health and safety, in my major transportation. It's tough to pick just 3, but for land use and open space, no more commercial properties, industrial or commercial properties, no more. Okay. You know, those are mine.
Thank you. Anyone else online? I think that's it. Okay, any other things that we have not talked about that you want to bring up?
For affordable housing, and not just for people who want to, for people who are low income, because there's no places in Norwalk for people who are lower income, and especially people who are disabled.
And seniors.
And seniors. I mean, unless you have, for the disabled people, unless you have Section 8, you cannot find housing. I trying to help a client find housing. She has Section 8, but her Section 8 was, she was paying $1,500, and everywhere else that I helped her look for apartment, it was 27 and higher per month. Section 8 finally came up so that she was able to get it, but it was not easy. For people who without Section 8, forget it. You have to move out of Norwalk, and that's what's been happening.
What about Jenny's point earlier on the health about the lack of access to healthy foods. Supermarket, no one raised that or brought that up. Was that something that needs to be addressed? And
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we said community health and safety, and that's actually included in that, but yes, we do, because the only supermarket that's what we have down in South Norwalk is, with Seatown,
Sometime.
and the price is,
are there farmers markets?
No,
only
in the summer, they
might do a
little farmers
but I kind of find it hard to believe that people don't have access to healthy food.
Yeah.
Because there's
is
plenty of ways to go to Stop and Shop, ShopRite, and other, and Costco's.
If I may say something, because I do research on food, and it's a cultural thing. And what we have is a lot of people that are eating processed foods constantly.
Yep.
And that's what these little bodegas have.
Mhm.
So if they had much more vegetables and fruits available. And I mean, we shop at DeFlorio's and they have tons of great fruits and vegetables there. So it's available. It's just that people are used to eating processed foods.
Mhm.
So it's not really a health issue because of where you live. It's just a cultural thing that's what people are used to.
Yeah, and how was it? That rang a bell to me.
Yeah.
So the access is there,
There.
but people don't take advantage of it because they're not used to eating fruits and vegetables anymore.
So that might be in terms of community education. making
Right,
sure
right,
Definitely.
exactly.
Definitely.
classes.
Right.
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, but then you have to go, if you go to a regular grocery store and you try to get, it's still expensive, right? Everything is expensive and you get five, and afford. So if I can, 5 fruit costs more than a box of cereal, I'm gonna buy a box of cereal if I have a, you know what I mean? But it is about education to a degree, but I don't necessarily see a food desert. And I find it funny when we have Restaurant Row.
Mhm.
It's sort of, how crazy is that we've got Washington Street and restaurants everywhere, but we call South Norwalk a food desert.
I was very surprised by that, because I was very disturbed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I live is a food desert.
That's a great divide.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's income or what would cause that kind of data, but, my family made a choice, maybe 18, 19 years ago to go like full organic with everything that we eat, right? And we've been eating like that for that long.
Yeah.
And
But it's not cheap.
But look at the fast food places that we have in Norwalk, yeah, on Connecticut Avenue. There's lines that wrap around. What is the name of that?
Chick-fil-A.
That's not food.
Oh, yes.
So this is what a lot of the younger people, which we have a lot in Sono, that's what they're eating.
So I think that's.
They're not cooking. Yeah,
I think
Yeah.
I understand.
Grubhub.
it's a culture thing.
Convenience.
Convenience.
Right, convenience, yeah.
And that's even more expensive than going to the store yourself,
Right.
because you have to tip the person that delivers the food to you, right? So, like, some people go, well, organic is too expensive, where a package of blueberries, basic blueberries would be, let's say, $3.50, and now you get the organic one, that's $4 or $5. Okay, so it's $1.50. This is what I tell my coworkers. I'd rather spend that $1.50 extra than that doctor copay and the medication that I'll have to get at the pharmacy. So you're actually saving money if you look at it that way, and you're eating healthier. But people don't, like you said, it's all convenience. It's a fast food society, and people don't even know how to cook. Back in our days, when we went to middle school, there was home ec.
Right.
You liked it or not, they taught you how to boil water and
We
make a
have
boil.
friends even older, our age, that go to Dunkin' Donuts every day for their coffee. They have a coffee maker at home, but they'd rather go to Dunkin' Donuts. which is maybe 20% coffee and the rest is chemicals, right?
Fillers.
So it's a cultural thing, it's not.
Even like you said, it could be a little education in that. Yeah.
Right.
Because I grew up in the South and I had 7 sisters and 9 brothers.
Wow.
And when my mother cooked, she tell you, this is what you're gonna eat. This is it. If you don't eat it, you go hungry. This is it. But now, when I got married and had kids, they wouldn't sit, you know, my mother used to make us sit to the table, even if you didn't eat, we had to sit to the table and talk, you know, this was the culture. But now you can't get a kid to sit to the table. They want a hot dog, they want the hamburger, they want this, that. You can't get them to eat a meal. And that's where that comes from. I mean, you know, because my mother, when she cooked, she said, hey, this is it. If you don't like it, you gotta grow to like it. You know, and that was the culture, yeah, but it changed. When I had kids, all mine wanted, and they would, you know, they wouldn't eat here, but when they go out, they go get the fast food. So, you know, like you say, it's a little bit of education in that food, you know. Cause I even myself, when my wife cooked now, I don't even taste the food. The first thing I grab is salt and pepper. And I don't, and it's just that I've been doing it so long, you know, it's a habit, and it's the culture of what they would, certain things they wouldn't eat. You know, you put it on the table, oh, I'm not gonna eat that, you know, and it's healthy for you, but it's just that they didn't.
And I think we have a lot of little bodegas or shops, you know, when you take when you consider West Avenue all the way down, I mean, there are places where you can go and get food and fruits and vegetables, right? I mean, and if you need the bigger things, you've got ShopRite and all the other places.
So I know we have to wrap up just we have the room. Is there a room constraint, time constraint with the room?
Yeah, the library closes at 8.
Okay,
So
so we should probably think about wrapping up, but are there any other things that I mean, this was a really good
I hope it was
discussion.
helpful.
We really appreciate, you know, the tendency with these is, and we need to understand what the problems are, but the challenge for us is to come up with the recommendations and the policies that are going to address the problems, not, so, I think your input into this was really helpful. If there are other things, we have index cards here, feel free to write it down, get in touch with us, get in touch with the redevelopment agency. We're gonna have another meeting like this in likely, early next year, where we'll be coming back with recommendations, policy recommendations, so you'll have another opportunity to talk with us again.
So how are you getting notification of the meeting? Because I only found out about the meeting about 3 o'clock this afternoon from someone else who received an email. And I get the newspaper every day. And I saw nothing in the newspaper, unless I missed it, but I didn't see it in the newspaper about the meeting, nor did I, hear about it.
we use primarily social media and email, but I think I now have your email address. So if you'd like, I can add you to our mailing list.
And if there are other people who you want to make sure are on the list, let us know, and we'll.
Bring your friends to the next meeting. Is my ask. I would say you could bring a couple people each.
Right.
That either share your concerns and may have different ideas too, then that's all helpful to us. And
We know that we can count on the two of you to come to everyone.
I'll be here as long as I'm walking and talking. This has been going on for quite a long time.
They've been escalating.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with the city. So if you can get together with the city and discuss these issues, hopefully, because we tried going on our own. I met with the mayor many a times. She can testify to that. And, didn't get anywhere really.
We're a
So-
very diverse neighborhood and we stick together, which makes it very remarkable.
Yep.
Mm.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone on the line. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you good? Okay.